Chapter 1. The Woman Beneath the Sign. The city called it non-violent loitering. A citation, a formality, something to clear from the docket before lunch. But the woman they brought in that morning wasn't listed by name in any newspaper. Not lately. She sat slouched on the bench in pre-trial holding, silent, still, coat bundled too tightly around her frame. Her hair was gray, wild at the ends, but tucked behind her ears like someone who once followed rules. A faded medical bracelet hung loose around her wrist, half tucked into the sleeve of a wool coat 3 sizes too big. No bags, no phone, no fingerprints on file. Just a thin folder marked Mills, P. 47C, Municipal Trespass. She had been found asleep near the rear entrance of the New Bridge Vive Medical Center. No tents, no cart, no signs of protest. Just curled up beneath the emergency overhang, the kind built to keep gurneys dry in the rain. A janitor had seen her at 4:45 a.m., thought maybe she'd fallen. Called security. Security called it in. No resistance, no statements. Just that look, the kind that made people feel something, not pity, not disgust. Recognition. The officer who booked her asked if she needed water. She nodded once. The intake nurse at the city jail offered to check her blood pressure. She declined, politely. When asked her name, she gave it softly. No drama, no fight, just Peggy Mills. They logged her as transient. First-time offense, misdemeanor, another easy Tuesday case. The prosecutor didn't notice it at first. David Reeves was on his 3rd coffee and running an hour behind. He'd been forgetting things lately. Files, meetings, faces. Mostly because his wife's funeral had been just 14 days ago. Shot outside her sister's apartment in Baltimore. Wrong place, wrong time. Now everything in his life felt distant, out of sync. His assistant had pulled the docket together. New staff, half-trained, overworked. When he scanned the name Mills, P., it meant nothing to him. Yet. Down in holding, the bailiff assigned to escort defendants that day opened the cell door and froze. He didn't know why. Just something about her. The way she stood, the way she waited. Like she'd done this before, somewhere far more dangerous. He shook it off. No one in that building knew what was about to happen. They didn't know that the woman sitting silently in Courtroom 3B, the woman with dirt on her cuffs and exhaustion in her spine, had once saved 6 lives with a pressure dressing and a tourniquet made from a torn-up flak vest. They didn't know she'd once stood between gunfire and a wounded convoy for 23 minutes straight. They didn't know she had medals. Or that they were currently boxed up in a pawn shop 11 miles from the courthouse. They didn't know who she was. But they were about to find out. Thank you for being here. Seriously. If you're still with us, you've already shown the kind of heart these stories deserve. If you'd like to help us keep telling them, the ones that too often slip through the cracks, then hit that like button and subscribe, so they keep finding their way to you. And one more thing, drop a comment below. Let us know where you're watching from today. We read every single one, and it means more than you know. Chapter 2. The Glances That Lingered. She sat without moving, hands folded, ankles crossed, not agitated, not scared, just steady, like a woman who'd already survived worse. Courtroom 3B had bad lighting and worse chairs. Half the audience was half awake. People waiting on parking tickets, broken tail lights, petty misdemeanors that filled the gaps between real cases. The judge hadn't come in yet. The prosecutor was still in his office. And yet, people looked at her. Not directly, not for long. But they looked. The clerk looked up from her screen twice, then a 3rd time. Something about that name scratched at the edge of memory. Peggy Mills. Where had she heard that before? She typed the name into the internal court system. Nothing came up. No priors, no address, no flagged alerts. But something in her gut whispered, "That's not a nobody." A man in the back row shifted in his seat. Retired Army jacket, Vietnam pin on his ball cap. He'd just come to pay a fine, but the moment he saw the woman on the bench, his eyes narrowed, like he was trying to place a dream he'd once had. He didn't say anything, didn't even move closer, just watched. The judge entered, Honorable Linda Vasquez, sharp, efficient. 25 years on the bench, and no patience for nonsense. Her docket was stacked, her inbox overflowing, and her law clerks were 2 interns deep and learning on the fly. Peggy Mills didn't register as a blip, until she looked up from the bench and saw her, and something froze, just for a second. Then it was gone, swept away by habit, deadlines, motion. The prosecutor, David Reeves, entered mid-case. His assistant whispered something about a low-priority trespass toward the bottom of the list. He barely nodded. He didn't see the woman. Not yet. 2 cases later. A nurse from the VA entered quietly and sat down in the 3rd row. Young, nervous, clipboard under her arm. She hadn't come to testify. She hadn't even been asked. But she'd heard about the woman brought in from behind the hospital. And something in her heart told her to show up. She wasn't even sure what she'd do. Just that someone had to be here. On the far side of the courtroom, a legal aide walked in late with coffee for the clerk. He spotted the woman on the bench. Stopped cold. His grandmother had told him stories about a woman who once saved half a platoon with nothing but gauze, morphine, and a kitchen knife. He never saw a photo. But something about this woman's posture, the way she held herself like a storm, just waiting for permission to come loose. He blinked, shook it off, delivered the coffee, said nothing. Then the judge glanced down at the docket. Her pen paused at the name, Mills P. She underlined it once, slowly. Not because it meant anything specific, but because it felt like it should. A thread tugged at something buried. That's how it always begins. Not with sirens, not with confessions. With a pause, a glance, a name that won't let go. Chapter 3. The Name They Almost Missed. Case 47C, the bailiff called out. City of Newbridge versus Peggy J. Mills. Her name echoed small in the courtroom, like a question no one wanted to answer. She stood slowly, unhurried. Her body moved like it had memorized pain a long time ago. The shuffle of her boots across the floor didn't draw attention, but the silence afterward did. The young public defender assigned to her case flipped through the folder. No notes, no intake interview. Just a single line from the report. Refused to vacate hospital property, possible mental health concern, non-combative. She leaned toward Peggy as they reached the table. "Ma'am, do you understand the charges being brought against you?" Peggy nodded once. The attorney blinked. There was something in that nod dash. Not fear, not resignation. Something practiced, like she'd been trained to acknowledge authority, even when it failed her. Judge Vasquez looked up, finally studied the woman in front of her. Her pen hovered. A long time ago, she had seen a woman just like this, on a tarmac in Kandahar. Sunburned, blood-stained, walking off a C-17, with a dozen wounded Marines in her wake. She blinked. No way, couldn't be. "Does the defendant wish to make a statement?" the judge asked. Peggy didn't speak at first. Then she cleared her throat. "Just needed a place to sleep," she said. Voice calm, flat. The judge nodded slowly, more to herself than anyone. The room stayed quiet, almost reverent. From the gallery, the older veteran in the army jacket leaned forward, hands gripping his cane tighter. Peggy Mills. He hadn't heard that name in over a decade. Not since his son told him a Navy corpsman kept him alive during a Marine convoy ambush near Mosul. A woman who wouldn't even give her first name. Just bandaged his chest and said, "Tell your mama you're coming home." David Reeves, the prosecutor, barely looked up. Until she spoke again. "There was a vent near the wall," she said softly. "It was warm, that's all." Her voice. It struck him. Not the words, the tone. He looked up, looked at her. Really looked. His mouth opened, then closed. It couldn't be. It couldn't. Could it? Years ago, in a dusty field hospital. He remembered blood in his throat and a woman leaning over him. With calm eyes and steady hands. He remembered being told later that a Navy corpsman pulled him through when no one else could. He never saw her again. Until now. He stood slowly, shaky, eyes locked on the woman in front of him. "Your Honor," he said, voice dry. "May I approach?" The judge blinked. Unusual. But she nodded. He stepped forward, closer, studied her. "Ma'am," he said gently, "did you ever serve overseas?" Peggy didn't flinch. Didn't answer right away. Then, yes. Quiet, steady, like breathing. He stepped back, hands shaking slightly, suddenly unsure of everything. The courtroom didn't gasp. There was no dramatic music. Just that slow, tightening feeling in the air. Like a storm cloud that had been sitting above them for years. And no one had noticed. Until now. Chapter 4. The memory they never questioned. The judge sat frozen, pen still in her hand, but no longer writing. She didn't ask for a recess. She didn't bang the gavel. She just stared at the woman standing in front of her and felt something old come unburied. A ripple ran through the room. No one could say why. But suddenly, everyone was listening. Peggy stood with her hands resting lightly on the defendant's table. Eyes down, not hiding, just grounded. The court-appointed attorney leaned toward her, whispering something urgent. Peggy shook her head. "No more," she murmured. From the gallery, the VA nurse shifted. Hand clutched over her chest. She'd seen the woman before. She remembered her sitting in the hospital lobby 2 months ago, holding a worn manila envelope against her chest like it was a shield. Inside it, a denial letter, 5 years old, and a faded copy of a Silver Star commendation. She remembered asking if she could help. The woman just smiled, said, "You already did," and walked away. The judge spoke again. "Miss Mills, the court records show no prior convictions, no violent history. Are you under medical care?" Peggy nodded, then corrected herself. "Was. My claim got denied. I appealed. They lost the file." "How long ago?" 14 months. The silence grew thicker. David Reeves was no longer reading from the file. He was staring at the table, then at her boots. He remembered those boots, or ones just like them, blood-soaked, pressed against his ribs, as a woman held pressure to the hole in his side and whispered, "Stay with me?" His memory had blurred so much since the war, but now he could smell the sand. The judge motioned to the court clerk. "Bring me her full file, everything, hospital records, VA access logs, service histories, if available." The clerk hesitated. Judge Vasquez didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "Now." A woman in the back row stood up, middle-aged, civilian clothes. She cleared her throat. I'm sorry, Your Honor. I know I'm not part of the case, but... The judge raised her hand. You are. Sergeant Linda Braxton, retired, 22 years, Marine Corps. That woman... She pointed, voice unshaking. Saved my Marine CO when our unit hit an RPG in Kandahar. She pulled 3 of us out. I watched her dig shrapnel out of a man's throat. With her bare hands. The courtroom stirred. She didn't even put her name in the report. Just handed off the wounded, and vanished. Peggy didn't speak. She didn't nod, didn't cry. Just stood still, like someone who'd spent a lifetime holding her breath. The court clerk returned, eyes wide, holding a slim packet. Judge, I found something. The judge opened the file. She didn't gasp, didn't blink, just read, Fleet Marine Force insignia, Joint Commendation Medal, 3 deployments, classified mission logs, honorably discharged. After a detainment overseas that left her with severe PTSD, spinal injuries, and a traumatic brain injury. Last claim denied. Appeal closed due to inactivity. Note, patient unreachable. Vasquez exhaled slowly. I'd like to know, she said, turning to the prosecutor, how this woman ends up here, over a warm vent and a blanket. Reeves had no answer, just a tear he didn't bother wiping. Chapter 5. The courtroom that stood still. The judge sat upright, but not cold. Her hands were still, her face unreadable, but something in her eyes had shifted, like a crack had formed in the foundation of everything she thought she knew about her own court. She turned to the bailiff. Clear my docket, she said. Everything after this case is postponed until further notice. A pause. Get me someone from Veterans Affairs, now. The courtroom didn't move, not out of confusion, out of respect. Something had settled over the room, a recognition, the kind that doesn't require medals or ceremony, the kind you feel in your chest before your head catches up. The clerk spoke softly. Judge, I think I found something else. She held up a printed form, barely stapled, nearly lost in the back of the file. Judge Vasquez scanned it. Denied coverage for PTS-related medications. Reason, missed reevaluation appointment. Peggy spoke then, not bitter, not loud, just real. I didn't miss it. I never got the notice. Why not? The judge asked. Peggy shrugged. I didn't have an address. A few rows back, a man in a medical jacket rose. I'm Dr. Harrell. I worked her case. I remember. He cleared his throat. She came in twice for checkups. First time she brought in her own documentation, cleaner than anything we had on file. Second time, she was gone. I asked. They said her claim lapsed. He turned toward the bench. I didn't fight it. I should have. The judge turned toward Reeves, her voice sharp now. How did this end up on my docket without being flagged? Reeves looked stunned. I don't know. My assistant, we've had turnover. I didn't recognize the name until I saw her just now. He shook his head. I recognized her because I woke up in a field hospital alive, and I never knew the name of the Navy Corpsman who got me there. The courtroom went still. You were military, Army specialist. Convoy got hit outside Bakuba. I was bleeding out. She, kept me alive until the medevac. His voice cracked. I never knew her name. Not until today. Vasquez leaned forward. So what you're telling me, counselor, is that you nearly prosecuted your own rescuer for trying to stay warm near the hospital that forgot her. Reeves didn't speak. He just sat, and everyone could see. The grief on him wasn't just from the war. Chapter 6. The Name They Won't Forget. 2 weeks later, the bench where she used to sleep was gone. Not removed, replaced. A small bronze plaque sat bolted to the new wooden slats, unmarked to most. But if you looked closely, the engraving read, "To the ones who served and were forgotten, we see you now. NMC Newbridge." Peggy Mills didn't attend the dedication, not because she wasn't invited, but because she was finally home. Not in the way most people imagine it. She didn't want a parade, didn't ask for back pay, didn't want speeches. They gave her an apartment 2 blocks from the VA clinic. Clean walls, a view of the trees, a desk with working drawers, a coffee maker that didn't drip. It wasn't much, but it was hers. The framed letter from the Department of the Navy sat untouched on her nightstand. So did the check, so did the medals they returned to her in a velvet box. But what she did place on the wall, carefully, tenderly, was a photo, tattered, burned at the edges. A snapshot of her unit in Fallujah, all grins and grit. No names written on the back. She didn't need them. She remembered. Judge Vasquez sent a handwritten note. Not formal, not professional, just real. "We failed you, but we will not forget you." It stayed taped to Peggy's fridge, right next to a drawing from a neighborhood kid who lived upstairs. Crayon hearts and a stick figure with gray hair labeled Miss P. As for David Reeves, he didn't return to court for another month. When he did, the staff said he looked different. He still grieved his wife. But something had shifted. That courtroom day, that moment dash, had stitched something in him that he hadn't known was bleeding. He now carried a small card in his wallet. Not a photo, just a printed quote, typed on cheap stock. "No one gets left behind, not while I'm still breathing." And the town? The town changed too. Quietly, subtly. More eyes opened to the corners they used to ignore. More hands reached toward the ones. Sitting silently at the bus stops, in alleyways, outside the clinics. Because once you've seen someone like Peggy Mills, once you've watched a forgotten hero rise from the margins of your own map, you don't unsee that. If this story stirred something in you, if you've ever felt invisible or walked past someone who might have been a hero, then let this be the moment you stop. Look, and remember, service doesn't always wear a name tag. And sometimes the bravest hearts are the ones we nearly forget. So share this. Let someone else remember too. And if you're still here, we've got more stories. More names worth saying out loud. Like, subscribe, and help us keep the promise. No one gets left behind.